Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and I've got Tim Durling from Tim's Vinyl Confessions back to the channel. Hello, mate. How you going?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me back.
Not a problem. We are going to do a show on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, we did a show last year, so I pitched this idea again to Tim that it, would be a good idea to maybe look at this year's nominees and go through those glaring omissions. Maybe pick 4 or 5 artists that we think should have been on the nomination sheet and should get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So what I'll do with, I'll go through the list of this year's nominees, and maybe at the tail end of the show, I'll give you my picks as to who I think will get in, should get in, and maybe Tim, you could, let us know your views out of this year's list, who should get in or who your picks are. So in no particular order, Kate Bush, Sheryl Crow, Missy Elliott, Iron Maiden, Joy Division / New Order, which is quite interesting, Cyndi Lauper, Willie Nelson, Rage Against the Machine, Soundgarden, The Spinners, A Tribe Called Quest, The White Stripes, and Warren Zevon. So a bit of a mixed bag there, Tim. You've got a lot of repeat nominees, a few first-timers. It's a real potpourri of different genres, which frustrates the hell out of me. I don't know about you, because it brings into pop and hip-hop, and that's something I'm sure we'll cover during the duration of this show. So maybe we'll just start with you, Tim. Let's talk about bands that you think should have been on the nomination sheet and just glaring omissions. What's your first pick?
Well, my list really hasn't changed much since last year, but I've got a list of 5 names down. And yeah, there's not a lot of rock and roll in this list of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees. Like it's kind of a mixed bag of genres. I mean, you've got country, you've got hip hop, you've got straight up pop. You do have some rock and metal, but yeah, it's I got a lot of opinions on the list, but I'm going to give you 5 examples of artists I think that should probably go in, probably won't. But first one is one I mentioned last year. I still think Foreigner should go in, and I think that whatever backroom politics should have nothing to do with a band's popularity and the fact that, I mean, let's face it, that's a band that can still go out and sell pretty big places, oftentimes without Mick Jones, without one original member left on stage. People love those songs. And I think that's what it's supposed to be about. But and the fact that they let Journey makes me wonder why Foreigner's not in there. I know with Journey, there was more of that dangling thing. Will we get Steve Perry on stage? I don't know. Yes. I will say this: if it's the feel good vote they were going for, it's good that Journey got in when they did, considering how they're acting now amongst themselves. Yes. Next one on my list is Boston. I'm flabbergasted that Boston is not in there. If they did nothing else except that first album, they should still be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for that. To this day, you can turn on any classic rock radio station and hear one of any of the 8 songs off that first album. If all Boston ever did was make that first album 9 songs and have the 9th song, Don't Look Back, that's really, that's the legacy right there. I mean, they should be in there.
What I was going to say, with those 2 bands invented American orientated rock,
Yeah, they did it before Journey.
Absolutely.
When Boston and Foreigner came out, Journey was still doing prog. Yeah. They were still doing their prog fusion days before Steve Perry joined. Yeah, they paved the way for that type of music that just ruled the airwaves. And in a lot of ways, they were ahead of the time.
And it makes you think that, like with Foreigner, like with Journey, I think I don't think that the hierarchy likes Journey, but I think there was a lot of heat with Journey because Don't Stop Believing was getting a lot of traction with High School Musical. A lot of kids were digging that song, and it had a little bit of a lift. It was like Toto with Africa. Maybe it's the irony type thing, but it certainly gave those artists a little bit of a kick. And I think a lot of this is driven to the ratings for this show. Of course, correct me if I'm wrong, it's on home box office. So they want to get the massive... So. Yeah, I'm not sure, but they want to get the massive viewers on that show and they want to create their drama. So it's very much like reality TV, Tim. It's like American Idol. They want to get ratings and they got Journey and let's put it together. Maybe Steve Perry will sing with the band.
Yeah.
Get those extra sort of songs.
And maybe that's what it is. Maybe both Foreigner and Boston, even though they've got a lot of hit singles, maybe they haven't had that one song that's had that revival. And you already mentioned my third choice, which is Toto. I think they should definitely be in there for, if nothing else. Yeah, Africa's taken on a life of its own. They're still out there, in a different form. They're still out there touring with Journey, as a matter of fact. Technically, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has never liked, the commercial sounding rock bands. But the fact is they've let in Journey. They've let in Bon Jovi. They've let in Def Leppard. It's time for them to, and let in bands that are more rock and roll than most of the nominations. Like they're getting away from the definition of rock and roll. My next one is sort of a reaction to some of the artists that are actually picked for the nominees. And I don't think this guy's ever been on the list, but it's another example of someone who never wanted critical acclaim, never wanted to change the world, only wanted to write good songs. And that's Bryan Adams. Like if you're going to let it, okay, so George Michael's on the list. And I don't think anybody would argue he was a brilliant pop songwriter, talented, but he wasn't a rock and roller. Bryan Adams is a rock and roller. Yeah, he had a lot of hit ballads, but essentially he's a rock and roller. So why isn't he ever considered? He's never hobnobbed with the cool crowd. So that's another one that's another omission. And the last one is kind of a band that I'm a little surprised hasn't already gone in because they sort of have a prestige going for them. And that's Bad Company. I'm a little surprised that they didn't get in a long time ago. Now, chances are, if they did get in, they would probably do what they're doing with Joy Division and New Order and put it free/Bad Company, because you got Paul Rodgers and Simon Kirke in both of those bands. But that's some of the omissions, I think, as far as rock bands that may not have had critical acclaim, but have songs that your average radio listener would know and continue to get airplay. So, yeah, I think there's a real identity crisis, I think, going on with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There should be a hip hop Hall of Fame. There should be a pop Hall of Fame. There is a country music Hall of Fame. I don't understand why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, unless, like you said, it's just another TV show now, and a TV show needs ratings.
Yeah, I'm of the view that it is generated by the TV ratings and to generate controversy. Jan Wenner has been on record. He hates Kiss, but he got Kiss. Well, Kiss were inaugurated one year, and basically it was only just the original lineup, not everybody in the whole Kiss history. But compare it to the Grateful Dead, Tim. There's been 56 players in the Grateful Dead. They're all inducted.
Yeah.
But Kiss, it was just the original four to see if they could get those four warring parties up on stage. And you could see it was like oil and water. Some factions just didn't want to be on the same stage. I can imagine if we were there, a fly on the wall, as soon as they did their interviews, they would have just parted like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, one of my favorite moments with Jan Wenner is when Rush were inducted, because he had gone on record as saying, basically, over my dead body is Rush getting in. And when he had to read, the list of inductees that year, he didn't even get to say their name. All he said was from Toronto, and the place just lit up. And I'm just thinking, good. Good
Yeah.
God, Leonard. You know,
Yeah.
eat your words.
And the very
you
famous speech.
Yeah. And for a while, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And for a while, it seemed like they had started to get it a little bit. Like most of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees, I had no interest in. But once they started to put, what Rush got in, because they ignored prog rock for such a long time. They put Yes in, which should have been the other way around. And that happens sometimes. Like, there should be an order to it, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But, Journey got in, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, Alice Cooper, Kiss. For a while there, it seemed like, okay, they're starting to get it. But then they go and pull something like what they did last year to Judas Priest, which is when they put them in that Sidemen.
Yeah.
Like it was a way to say, well, we got them in, so you'll shut up. But they didn't really.
The egg and spoon race, and you get the consolation prize. It's just, that was just so frustrating.
Yeah, and I'm afraid they're going to do the same thing to Iron Maiden this year.
Yes. Well, when we get into the my selections, who I think will get in, there's a couple of sort of rocky, metally bands, and I think that their criteria is in the 5 selections, we've got to limit it to 1 of hip hop, 1 of pop, 1 of country, and 1 of metal, hard rock, or rock. And 3 doesn't go into 1. You know what I mean? It's got to be only 1. Yeah. And that's what it's going to be. I'm going to go through some of my picks. And Tim, I'd really appreciate your commentary because some of these are quite surprising. So the first one off the bat, Solo. Can you believe it? He's not in.
You know what? I've never thought about that because, excuse me, I know that he went in as a member of Sabbath, but you're right, because Ozzy is such an icon and such a character that it is a little surprising that he hasn't gone in.
I mean, he's an icon of rock. He's probably one of the few figureheads of metal that everybody knows. He's part of pop culture. Crazy Train, he must get mass royalties because it's played in NFL, it's played on every sports show. His songs are known. Even if play a little bit of a snippet, that's Ozzy.
He was a reality TV show star. That's how a younger generation knows him. Oh, he's the guy that was on the Osbournes.
So, I mean, he got a Grammy for Patient Number 9, which is kind of like a late consolation prize. And the Grammy Awards are similar to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because similar. The selection is just ridiculous. And it's just been a joke because they always seem to get it wrong. But just going through the list of the omissions, I was just so surprised that Ozzy, being an icon and legendary, has never sort of picked up that award. So...
And he's been eligible since 2005, 2006. It's 25 years in the So I'm a little surprised by that because people, they know who he is. They know him by one name. All you could do is say Ozzy. Everybody knows who you mean.
So I think the board does not like hard rock and metal, and they think that we've ticked the box. He's in Black Sabbath. That's enough, because that's why David Coverdale and Whitesnake, they'll never get it. And yet, in Deep Purple,
Clapton gets in, and Jeff Beck gets in. Yardbirds and Cream. There's people that have been in several bands, and they get in every time. Like the whole, like Neil Young and people like that. They're the Rolling Stone crowd, right?
Absolutely, the Beatles solo. I mean, I don't have any objection to it, but I'm just doing it as a comparison. You look at his body of work, it's, critically and commercially, it's high quality. He's put out high quality hard rock for a considerable period of time. He's way influential. He kept his career going through the grunge era, through Ozfest. Whether it's Sharon or he's got good people around him with these ideas. You're talking about the entity that's Ozzy Osbourne. He's been a mammoth all the way through, and not nominating him is just an injustice.
Yeah.
I'll put a little subset to this. It's not one of my picks, but probably Ronnie James Dio as well. He's had a lot of heat from that documentary. A lot of people are looking at his career. I mean, for God's sakes, that guy was right there at the start of rock and roll. He should be considered, but he's a genre artist and probably too genre. And they've got to be thinking of the show, the HBO show, and how are viewers going to relate to Ronnie James Dio? Do they get the Dio disciples, or what do they do?
If Dio was ever going to go in, I think he would have had to have gone in as a member of Sabbath.
And that was a glaring omission.
Yeah. If they let Coverdale in as a member of Deep Purple, that was not the most popular era of Purple, but they let him in. It's like, if the rules don't apply to everyone, then there are no rules. It's completely arbitrary.
It is. And like Deep Purple, the bass player, Nick Simper, didn't make the cut, but they put Rod Evans on the nomination sheet. And you know the reason is Rod Evans is missing in action. They're hoping that he might pick up the phone and I'm here, I'm alive. And there's a little side story. So that's, they pick and choose their own narrative, what will suit the HBO show. So there you go. Next one. The Sweet or Sweet. Hugely influential. They didn't have as many hits in America, but in England, they had so many hits, and they are so influential to bands like Cheap Trick, the Ramones, Def Leppard, Motley Crue. You know, all of their songs are just so influential, and they were right at the vanguard of that glam rock, hard rock movement in the early 70s. So this is another subtopic where you've got bands that are huge in Europe and UK and may have one or two hits in the US, but they get admitted and they get ignored, irrespective of their influence. So
I would put Slade in a similar category. Same idea, a huge band internationally, but not so much. Although, like you talk about Sweet, most people know Ballroom Blitz.
Yes,
they might not know who sings it, but they know that song.
Yeah, Rebel Rouser, Blockbuster, Wigwam Bam,
Fox on the Run.
Twist, Fox on the Run. Lovers Like Oxygen. Was that Oxygen, a hit in Canada or the US?
It was a top 10 single.
Yes, yes.
Action.
Absolutely. I've just done a recent show with Peter Jones covering Fanny Evans, which is going to be dropping soon, or by the time this show goes up. And Peter Jones was telling me a story about Motley Crue when they were putting the band together, and they put an ad in the trade paper, and it was for the singer, must sing like Brian Connolly.
Yeah.
So,
and if you listen to Hellraiser, that's the beginning of Kickstart My Heart.
Yes.
So very influential.
But people forget about it. And that's the thing. And a lot of the influence bands get in above the ones that actually influence the band. So, this one. So the next one is a lady that was born in 1950 from Detroit, Michigan. She played in the 60s all-girl group called the Pleasure Seekers.
I know who you mean.
She was spotted by Mickey Most, came to UK, and then became a star. And I'm talking about Suzi Quatro.
Yeah.
So Suzi Quatro had so many hits in the UK: Can the Can, 48 Crash, Devil Gate Drive. Probably known in America through Happy Day. She was only in 7 or 8 episodes, but if she's walking through the streets of New York, they'll go, hey, Levitascadero.
Yeah. Or that song she had, Stumbling In.
Top 5.
Which is not really a rock song per se. So I think that's one of those songs that people remember, but they don't necessarily know who sang it.
influenced Chrissy Hine from the Pretenders, influenced Joan Jett, influenced Blondie. They all cite her as a role model, however, ignored. So I just think it's just absolutely outrageous that Suzi Quatro is ignored, has never been nominated, but a lot of her children or the people that she's influenced have got in before Suzi Quatro. So that's another glaring omission. I'm going to do a reach out to your mate, Matt, and a little bit of Aussie, In Excess, Listen Like Thieves, Kick, huge hits. People seem to forget how big that band was in the US and around the world in the late 80s and the early 90s. They had an absolute charismatic lead singer, a fine musician supporting them. They crossed a lot of different genres. They did new wave, they did funk, they did rock. And, they were sort of one of the top bands in the world, and how soon we forget. So I was hoping that, there were a few documentaries that came out about Michael Hutchence that it may have generated a little bit of heat, but again, ignored, never been nominated. I think it's inevitable that somebody that's cool, up and coming will cite them as an influence, and then that'll generate a little bit of interest. It just needs one cool for school band that needs to cite another band that's uncool, and then they become cool.
I'm a little surprised because, the one thing that you hope happens when you've got someone who's influenced by someone that does get in, that they have some clout in, saying, hey, we think this should get in. I've always read that Michael Hutchence and Bono were such good buddies. Well, why doesn't Bono raise a stake and say, why aren't In Excess in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I was hoping, Duran Duran got in, kind of a similar wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Depeche Mode got in, even though they're a little bit more out there, a bit more electronic and darker.
Well, again, I think it's like, the bands that I listed, they really weren't out to save the world. They just wanted to write great songs. Yeah. And they did it consistently. And that should count for something. And, they were known all around. That's another thing, that worldwide coverage. Like, they were known in countries that, don't even, you only get your music through bootlegs or counterfeits or whatever. Like, people In Excess were known around the world. And, they're one of those, rarities where they didn't just get lucky in America with one song. They did it consistently from about, like, say, 1986 through 1991. In Excess were everywhere. So and the work that they did during that time should be recognized.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a glaring omission. Maybe this is a little bit more niche, but in the class of 77, punk rock was kind of king and just burst out of the UK. So you had the Clash, you had the Sex Pistols, but there was a third band who were actually the first band to put out a single and the first band to put out a full-length album that was punk. And I'm talking about The Damned. So you probably can't see that's a photo of The Damned. Simply, first single, New Rose, their first album, Damn, Damn, Damn. They've influenced a ton of bands. I'm talking about there wouldn't be a Green Day, there wouldn't be an Offspring, and all those very popular poppy punk bands that you hear on the radio today if it wasn't for The Damned. And they were the first band that committed that sort of style. A lot of people say, the Ramones came first and maybe the Saints in Australia, but The Damned were there. They're still touring. I'm seeing them in June, and they're great musicians. They still do great songs. The original lineup of the original four got together late last year in the UK, and that was a roaring success, and they still can cut it live. But just from a historical influence point of view, you can't put the Clash, you can't put the Sex Pistols and ignore The Damned. So I know you're probably not a fan of that sort of music, Tim, but they've got to be.
But you're absolutely right. I think the problem with The Damned is, like, so with the Sex Pistols, there's controversy that followed them everywhere. Whether it's Sid Vicious dying at such a young age and the uproar that they caused, on British television, and the idea of, the whole anarchy thing, and the fact that, they only did really the one album, and yet they're just legendary. The Ramones have such a marketable image of them. I mean, the joke is they've sold more T-shirts than albums. That's true. Everybody, you hear any Ramones song and instantly you know it's the Ramones. The Clash got lucky because they actually had some pop hit singles. I mean, they had Train in Vain, and they had Should I Stay or Should I Go, Rock the Casbah. So a lot of people knew them. Damned really didn't have that. So I think that's what, and as musicologists, we know that, but there's the whole wide world out there where you have to sit back and go, well, maybe that's why, or maybe it's that reason why they haven't been considered. But with punk being such an influential genre, the DIY aesthetic, and how it did really come alive in America in the mid 90s with all of those bands that you mentioned, I think eventually you will say, I think you'll have a better chance of seeing them show up as any of the other punk bands that were, like you mentioned, the Saints and the Dictators, or, some of the other, mid-tier bands. I think the Damned stand a chance of getting in just on that influence alone. Absolutely.
Well, Green Day got in first nomination, so they got in.
That's another thing. Yeah.
That sort of rolls me up a little bit. But again, I think it plays to the show, the actual that's on HBO or pay subscription. Is that going to generate a lot of interest that the Damned get nominated and going to play the show? And that's why there's a lot of bands that single-handedly create a genre. Now, I'll be out there. Venom created a genre of music called black metal. They're never going to get on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Tim. But I'm just saying this is an extreme example. There are bands out there that single-handedly create a whole genre of rock, a whole influence thousands. And how many bands have been influenced by a band as extreme as Venom? They've created that whole black death extreme metal, Scandinavian, Norway, etc., etc. But there's not a chance in hell you'll ever see them on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
You picture those guys up there in suits, doing their thank you speech. You'd have a better chance. You know what? You'll see Motorhead go in first, if anything. Sadly, all those guys are dead now.
Too late. It's too late. Yeah. My final one, and I'm going to put a few honorable mentions, and I don't need to go into much detail, is these guys. Why?
I'm a little surprised that they're not. Yeah, I really am.
And you know why? They think that they are a reality show because they didn't play their instruments. They sang, but a lot of their compositions were written by Neil Diamond. They had outside writers write for them. But from, 3 or 4 albums in, they played their own instruments. They toured the world. They came to Australia. It was like Beatlemania. Look at the chart history. They've had so many number one albums. There's a narrative. There's only one of them alive still. Mickey Dolenz, isn't it? Yeah. He's the last man standing. Wonderful crafted songs, great musicianship, nicely sung. And they're really one of those few wildly successful bands of the 60s that have never been nominated, I don't think, or have made the cut. I find that incredibly, surprising.
Yeah, I think they're just one cool person away from getting in and having someone rave about how great one of their albums were, how it changed their opinion on something, or it really got them into music. Like somebody like a Matthew Sweet or somebody like that. It's going to take somebody like that. Yeah.
Do you have any honorable mentions off the bat that you can think of? I've got two.
The ones, the ones that I mentioned, I think, it's based on hit singles and record sales and able to, put butts in seats. I mean, I'm realistic enough to know that as much as I love them, a band like Kansas is probably not going to get in. Although I think they're every bit as deserving of it. And certainly Carry On Wayward Son's taken on a life of its own.
Mm.
But I don't think that's quite enough to get them in. You know, it would be great to see Whitesnake get in, but the trouble is that in America, Whitesnake were only they were really, really big, but for a very, very concentrated period of time, and that's it. And because Coverdale, he didn't want to do the package tours, even though I think it probably hurt him, because that's where your American fans are. But you know, it would be nice to see them get in, but I don't think it's going to happen. So no, I've got some pretty strong opinions on who I think should get in of the nominees, shouldn't get in, and should get in, but not right away.
Yeah, no worries. I'll get to that in a sec. One thing, just a little bit of being a little bit of a wag. The head of the current Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, his name's John Sykes. So definitely David won't get in.
That's the same guy. There was a guy, the same name, spelled the same way, that was an early. He had something to do with MTV in the early years, which is just kind of funny. That you've got such a distinct name.
Yeah, well, I was just saying, I don't think David will ever get in if he's the head of.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but you know what? If he is, and next thing you know, Thin Lizzy gets in, then we'll know it's that John Sykes.
Why aren't they in? That's ridiculous.
Again, people know them for one song over here, sadly.
Yeah, absolutely. Just some quick honorable mentions. Faith No More. They were huge in the States.
Because they changed things. That they were an early, maybe they were a little bit too soon.
Cross genre. They brought the tribes together. Metal, alternative. They had hip hop. They had funk. Basically, they were one band that brought all the tribes together, because in the late 80s and early 90s, you had all these different tribes and a lot of crossover acts, and they were one of the originals. And I know, these guys were quite big business in America, huge, probably bigger in the UK and US and subsequent tours. But with that Real thing, that went platinum. Epic was a bit of a hit, and they were touring stadiums. So their influence in regards to rap metal and funk metal is immense. And I think that's a bit of a surprise, a bit of a head scratch. Diana Ross solo, not in.
That's surprising.
It's a complete head scratch. Anyway, that's mine. So I'll go over my selection. So I'm doing it on the basis of 5, and looking at the criteria, it can be between 5 and 7, but I'll pick the 5 that I personally would like to see get in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then maybe you can come up who you'd like to get in. So my first selection is Kate Bush. I've covered this in our show last year. So influential. There wouldn't be a PJ Harvey, Bjork, Lord, Tori Amos. There's so many artists that have just been influenced by Kate Bush. And I think with the Stranger Things bringing the Running Up the Hill song back to the fore, people are discovering what a truly genius of an artist she was or is. She produces, she writes, she's just outer-worldly talent and so influential. And I think the thing that's held her back is she's a bit of a cult artist in the US, huge in the UK and all around the world. But I think with Stranger Things, I would hope that she finally gets some traction. So that's my pick. Iron Maiden, simply because they have influenced so many bands. If Judas Priest is there and Iron Maiden's not, that's inconceivable. They are a universal band. So they tour India. They go to places that other bands don't go. So you might have somebody in Iraq turning on a transistor radio or playing an Iron Maiden tape because they travel the world. And that galloping prototype Iron Maiden sound has influenced so many bands and, inspired teenagers or young kids around the world to pick up a bass, pick up a guitar and strum and bang their heads and play in a rock band. So it's just so immense. Joy Division, New Order. That's, basically Joy Division was sort of post-punk, very influential. If there was no Joy Division, you wouldn't have bands like The Cure, possibly Depeche Mode. I'm just thinking of bands that got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and New Order were at the vanguard of that electronica sort of movement. They've influenced so many different bands, so I think they should be in. Willie Nelson, I know he's country, but if you put in Dolly Parton last year, you cannot leave Willie Nelson out. I think he's about 91 or 92, Tim, but he's been there right back to the days of Nashville. Super songwriter, super artist, still going strong, and master craftsman, and he should be selected. And my last pick is the White Stripes. They really were the vanguard of bringing the blues back to mainstream, and they had that whole revisionist garage rock of the 2000s, and Jack White is still going strong, and he's in the mainstream. And there's so many songs of White Stripe that you still hear on mainstream radio, and they're an entity until their own. And I think it's the first year they're in, and that's my selection. So just in summary, Kate Bush, Iron Maiden, Joy Division, Willie Nelson, and the White Stripes. That's who I pick. Now, whether they get in, I'm not sure.
My 5 picks are similar to my first 3 are the same. Kate Bush should get in. And it's kind of it's an interesting situation because not only was she a cult artist, but she didn't tour. So that had something to do with she only went so far. Now, she was fairly big in Canada because I know that, our music channel, Must Music, played a lot of Kate Bush videos. But Running Up That Hill only hit number 30 in its original run in the States. But of course, it got a new life in Stranger Things. And the only downside is that started after last year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was over with. And are people talking about it as much as they were? No. But hopefully it would be a chance that through screwing it up, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame gets something right, because she's deserving to go and because she has influenced so many and of artists that you'd probably be amazed to know the number of artists from all different genres that were influenced by Kate Bush that you would never think of ever listened to her. So I think she should get in. I would have thought she should get in anyway, but this year, this is the time. I think this is her shot. So we'll see. And also there, because she is known for being reclusive, maybe she'll show up. Maybe she'll perform.
There's the HBO angle.
That's the angle. And really, when you talk about where's the angle with some of these groups that don't really have the story behind them, you only need 1 or 2. So,
yes.
The next one is Iron Maiden. Yeah, definitely. I mean, yes, if Iron Maiden get in, then it is a case of them doing it in the right order because Judas Priest did come first. But like I said, they did Judas Priest really dirty by putting them in that sidemen category, which doesn't even make sense because they're not sidemen. They're a band. It's never been, Halford and the various, it's always been, there's a lineup change, but it's a band. That to me is a token thing. It's like you said, it's like participation. Here you go. You showed up here. You take this home.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, Iron Maiden are a global entity. And not only do they play countries where no one else goes, when they're there, they fill stadiums. And the
cross-generational.
And the icon, they're so iconic. The logo, you just picture the logo, you picture Eddie, and influential the world over. It sold a lot of albums in the States without ever getting mainstream pop radio. People just still knew who Iron Maiden were. So I'd like to see them get in. Soundgarden. I'm a little surprised that Soundgarden aren't already in. I thought all of those big Seattle bands got in, but for whatever reason, I guess they didn't. And unfortunately, Chris Cornell's dead. So it's you'd have the other guys show up, but they'd have to get someone else to sing if they perform. But they should definitely go in. I think that I always thought they were, and I'm a little surprised Alice in Chains aren't in either. I'm a little surprised that they didn't get in. So I think Soundgarden should get in. And going back to the influential thing, I was kind of surprised to see that the Spinners weren't in. Now, it's R&B, but there's R&B acts that are already in there. And, there's R&B acts that came after. So why wouldn't you let the Spinners in? They had a ton of hit singles over, quite a long period of time. So that's the 5 that I think should go in. Like and you mentioned the White Stripes. Well, there's an example. Absolutely, they're deserving to go in, but I think they should wait their turn. I don't like that idea of somebody just popping up and instantly getting in where other bands have to wait and wait and wait. That doesn't make any sense to me. Willie Nelson, he's such an icon, right? Like everybody knows who Willie is. Not rock and roll in the slightest, but such an outlaw, such a badass that, he'll probably get in. He'll probably get in.
Yeah. Well, that's nice. All right. So I'll tell you who I think will get in. So I think Kate Bush will get in because I think it's time. There's a little bit of momentum. So we'll just wait and see. I think they're going to pick Missy Elliott for the hip hop genre.
Makes no sense.
Yeah. So every year there's a blue chip hip hop artist. They will always pick that artist. And I think Missy Elliott will get that nod. Willie Nelson, simply the narrative, will he turn up on stage? He's had so much history. There's a lot of love for Willie. He's always in the news for something or other, and it would be interesting. It would be interesting to see what sort of performance that he would bring. Because the thing about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's famous for the finale where they have the All-Star Jam. Who's there, who's not, and I think that they've got in their head, would love to have Willie as the centerpiece, like Dolly was last year, and you have all these people around him. So I think just for the narrative, the show Willie Nelson. Now, here's the interesting one. I think Rage Against the Machine will get the nod simply because you've got Iron Maiden, Soundgarden, Rage Against the Machine. You've got these harder rock edge type ones, and 3 don't go into 1. So I'm just thinking that Rage Against the Machine, you've got Tom Morello's on the board. They all seem to like him. I know I said this before, this is a little bit of cross interest, but he's had so many nominations, and I think it's probably their time. They'll select that. And the White Stripes. I love the White Stripes, but they're very kind of critics' darlings. They're very much the it band. Rolling Stone love them. And I think they're, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has got a history of parachuting bands that they like on the first nod or nomination. So what do you think about the ones that you think will get in, despite what your views are?
I kind of agree with your choices for all the reasons that you mentioned. Like, as far as hip hop goes, I know Tribe Called Quest is really influential. I don't know any other songs. I can name Missy Elliott songs. So for just basic popularity, she'll probably be the one that gets in. White Stripes, they'll probably get in first pick, even though they should probably wait. Cyndi Lauper and George Michael, I mean, I'm a child of the 80s, and they were very influential in so many ways, but neither of them are rock artists. They're just, it's pop. They did write their own songs for the most part, which is quite something. I can't picture, maybe not this year. I don't know. I hate to say it, but if either one, it'll probably be George Michael because he's dead. Because they love doing that. They love waiting too long. I'll be honest with you. The one I was really surprised to see, who isn't already in, is Warren Zevon, because he strikes me as one of those cool artists that they would have put in a long time ago, regardless of not selling that many albums. And basically, most people know him for one song, and that's it. But I'm surprised that he wasn't in years ago.
Yeah. No, I think you've raised some really valid points, but again, I'm sorry I'm repeating myself. I think it all gears up to the show. And I was thinking about Cyndi Lauper and George Michaels, and sorry, I don't think I mentioned that at the start of the show in the nomination sheet. Didn't talk about George. If they did put him in as part of the performance at the end, I guess they'd get an Adam Lambert or somebody to do a tribute to him. Look, he's got one of the greatest voices of pop. You can't deny that. And he could sing the telephone book, to be quite frank, and still make it captivating, you know?
As far as, the person to nominate him, they could have like Brian May or somebody nominate him, because he did such a phenomenal job singing Somebody to Love as the Freddie Mercury tribute.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's a head scratch. But one thing I think we agree, there are some glaring omissions, and it seems to rile up so many people. There's so many of these shows that get on YouTube. I mean, we're just another one. But you look at the social commentators, and they put their comments of, glaring omissions, and I guess a lot of people take it personally because they feel that I like this band, but it's not being validated, and it's kind of a little offensive. On one hand, we think it's a whole pack of bollocks, like Chrissy Hind has actually come out in the press and said, "Oh, it's just a whole lot of rubbish. Don't get it. I only really did it because for my parents, to validate, and because they wanted to see me up on stage." But I think deep down, a lot of people like validation and acceptance that the bands that I follow, like your Rush, your Deep Purple, are finally getting the nod and getting those awards. And by these sort of institutions ignoring and not putting them on the nomination, it's just a way of saying, well, your opinion is just rubbish. You know what I'm saying? Do you feel that?
I know what you mean. And even when they, there's quite a few cases where even when they do put someone in that I happen to be a fan of, there's always an asterisk. Like when Van Halen got nominated, that was a debacle. Like that was, Velvet Revolver up there butchering. Like that was a very, very, very strange thing. I mean, Sammy Hagar, Michael Anthony showed up, and there's another thing. If, like I said, if Coverdale went in as part of Deep Purple and Sammy Hagar went in as part of Van Halen, why didn't Dio go in as part of Black Sabbath? It's
all arbitrary.
Yeah. Anyway, but you're right. When someone you like does get in, it does kind of affirm that, this is good stuff. I do like this kind of music, but I like it anyway. Sometimes it makes me, the bands that consistently get ignored makes me like it even more.
Yeah, it sort of riles you up, and you put the defense on. And like, I know Eddie Trunk has created, or correct me if I'm wrong, a metal hall of fame, but all these little, the reason why they've created this metal hall of fame is because this genre of music that we love so much is downtrodden and ignored.
Yeah.
And should be embraced.
And not treated as it should be. In other words, Judas Priest in the Metal Hall of Fame, should be, way, way up there. Shouldn't be an afterthought, which is what that sidemen nominate. Sidemen are people that play with the that I will never understand that. And it's never, the thing is, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as an entity never strike me as people that were going to come out and say, you know what, we made a mistake. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I did want to bring up the sidemen topic, because the sidemen topic, it should be the E Street Band. It should be the Revolution, as in Prince and the Revolution. Yeah. It should be those behind the scenes folk that have supported these legendary acts. It should be the Wrecking Crew, all those session musicians that played on those wonderful Beach Boy or all those other classic rock albums of Elvis's backing band. Yeah,
that is the perfect category. But putting Judas Priest, it's like a booby prize. It's like to me, I reckon that there were some really vigorous arguments. You probably had your this is a little bit of fantasy, but you probably had Tom Morello, thumping the table and saying Judas Priest should be get in,
And they said,
Dave Grohl's there.
Set this guy up. Here's a category. It doesn't make any sense. We don't care. Put them in.
We'll just we'll put them in.
Yeah, it's a token thing, it's a gesture that doesn't mean much. Even if they took a band like, one of the bands I think should go in, they took a band like Toto and put them in the sidemen, that would make more sense because those guys were all session musicians. Like, it's not like the guys at Judas Priest played on other people's albums. It doesn't make any sense.
Yes. Well, with Toto, I mean, gee whiz, those guys have had their fingerprints on so many great landmark albums. That makes sense. But my concern about awarding the award to Judas Priest in that sidemen category is it's stitched up Iron Maiden, because how can you put Iron Maiden in and
legitimately
Judas Priest have been the sidemen? Because it's going to be, there's going to be these. Why did you put them in the sidemen booby prize?
You wouldn't have Iron Maiden if it wasn't for Judas Priest.
Yes. So you've kind of stitched up, and even Motorhead in future years. So it's kind of stitched us up.
Another thing that they did by putting them in there is they set a precedent.
Yes.
That's their loophole forevermore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. You deliver the goods. I'm glad I twisted your arm, and we did a sequel to our show last year. But I think it's a topic that is just so many different sort of rabbit holes we could go down. But I think we've covered it pretty well. And you've had your picks, I've had my picks, but what they come up with in May, heaven knows. I'm sure it'll be completely different. But it'll be interesting to see what the viewers think. Please put your comments. Please check out Tim and Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. And thank you, everyone. I finally hit 1,000 subscribers plus. Woohoo!
Yes, congratulations on that.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Please put your comments down. I really enjoy reading it, and Tim as well. And Tim and I will do a show on this very channel very soon. Cheers. See ya.